I hope you can all see me. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Economist Group, we'd like to thank DuPont for allowing us and inviting us to participate in this very important issue, Global Food Security Index. It goes beyond participating. We have been instrumental in developing it for the last 3 years. So what is global food security? Basically, access to food is a basic human right. We should not even be debating it, but we still are. And it's now become one of the biggest challenges facing policymakers around the world, NGOs, private sector, and you, the consumers, as well. It's not just today's problem, it's the future problem as well. So how did it come about? Food security, as I said, has moved up to the forefront. It's geopolitics as well. It's not just a question of digging up the ground and feeding the population. It goes beyond that. 3 years ago, DuPont approached the ERU in a very unique piece of work that they've commissioned to the ERU to produce on an annual basis. And this program, over the last 3 years, we've been able to track how food security is doing around a large number of countries in the world. So this morning we are pleased to share some of this work and the findings that we've found for this year as well. Our goal is to explore GFSI, the Global Food Security Index, in some detail so that you can understand its use as a tool, not just as a strategy, planning, but also understanding and identifying which are the key priorities, what are the strengths, weaknesses across a large number of countries. Population around the world is going to forecast to hit 9 billion by 2050. What is driving it? Population rising around the world, changing consumption patterns, instability, climate changes. Nobody quite understands the impact. It happens, we try and deal with it. It's more reactionary than a prevention method. So these are some of the key things that we've tried to capture in the tool. A quick overview. The index considers the systems, structures of the national food systems across internationally established definitions, dimensions of food security, affordability, availability, and the nutritional quality and food safety. By the time you leave this room at the end of the morning, these are the 3 things you'll remember. Index seeks to establish a benchmark or international standard of food and security against which all countries can be measured. So it's a level playing field we've aimed for across all the countries. We did not try and attempt to include a country which did not have credible data, and we could do a benchmark on a regional and country-by-country basis. Number of indices measures the outcomes of food insecurity on population, but our index looks at the drivers of food security or insecurity to better understand what is the best practice and structure and priorities. What is the result? It's a systematic coordination of a large body of information that provides key measures of progress with food security. And as I mentioned, we've been able to track it for the last 3 years. What does this do? This enables priorities for a wide range of stakeholders, public and private sectors, organizations who are charged with improving national food systems. As you can see from the map, very busy. It captures the whole world. The level of the index is based on 107 most populous countries divided by region. And you can see there's a very detailed list, including some of the smaller pack islands. Encompasses a great regional diversity and includes developing and developed countries. This is an issue really for the developing countries, but you do need to measure the developed world, how it stands. This year, to expand the geographic scope and content, we've added 2 new countries, Kuwait and UAE, United Arab Emirates. So now that makes it 109 countries. We've also added 2 new indicators to the index this year. Food loss added to the availability category, and obesity, output variable. But you cannot measure obesity. We do not have reliable data for it. Their index for this year will be released in Istanbul on May 28th. Is that right? Yeah, by Dupont. The study will provide and compare a wide range of economies and food systems in order to define the final values of the measurement and classification tool. The following slides will discuss some of the nitty-gritty of the index. This is the absolute core framework of the index. Like you can see, there are 4 dimensions, 4 SWOT analysis, as we call it. How did we come about the index? It is a combination of external expert discussion and primary and secondary research to develop this overall framework. We identified 4 key criteria. Affordability, what does it do? It measures the ability of consumers to buy food, their vulnerability to price shocks, which is what we're talking about, resilience, and the presence of programs and policies to support in case of disaster. The weight given to affordability is 40%. That's quite a high weight. Availability. This measures how sufficient the national food supply is in each country. Risk of supply disruption. The national capacity to distribute food and research efforts to expand agricultural production. The weight for this is 44%. So it's really the key variable as well. Thirdly, quality and safety. The weight for that is 16%. Measures the variety and nutritional quality of the average diet of each country study, as well as food safety. All the indicators rely upon a combination of international data sets from organizations such as the FAO, the World Bank, UN, but also we've drawn on the ERU's own country expertise and data set. We will discuss the prime adjustment factor in more detail in the following slides and give you an idea of the indicator structure. This slide gives you a quarterly food price adjustment factor. This is something new we've added this year. Very much still in the developing stage. This is the early part of it for this year. And as time goes on, as we have more data, credible information, it will be developed accordingly. So what does it do? It's adjusted each quarter for global food price fluctuations as observed through the FAO Food Price Index. So it's coordinated with what the FAO Food Price Index says. This quarterly price adjustment factor, as it is called, provides quarter-on-quarter trend analysis and serves to illustrate and measure how vulnerable countries are to price shocks. Quarterly trends also connect to the non-structural factors of importance to the food security picture, such as climate and geopolitical issues that affect food security globally and nationally. The next slide. Affordability. The food affordability category measures the ability of consumers to purchase their food, the vulnerability to price shocks, and the presence of programs and policies to support when shocks occur. This category considers income factors, key factors. This is absolutely important. GDP per capita, percentage of household expenditure that does not towards food and poverty measure. We also look at overall agriculture import tariffs. This is a complex issue where we've tried to measure it as best as we can. It assesses the extent to which it becomes a factor for domestic food prices. Thirdly, poverty. What we found that consumers closest to the global poverty line and those for whom food consumption takes up a significant portion of household expenditure are the most vulnerable to high food prices. Food policies, such as safety nets by the governments, a risk mediation mechanism to raise access to food when affordability is an issue. This is also captured in the index. The fourth thing is what support is also given by policymakers to farmers in times of price shocks or disasters. Availability. As I said, this is the measure of national food supply. The risk of disruption and capacity for agriculture to contribute to R&D, research and development. This also captures food availability as a measure of supply relative to the size of the population and looks at whether or not people have enough to eat to meet their daily needs. This is also based on the FAO food balance sheet approach. It also considers the chronic dependence on food aid, treated as evidence of fundamental weakness and policy failures. This also makes a country, some of the countries most vulnerable and heavily dependent on donor support, and therefore less food secure. Corruption, a key issue on this continent and a large number of South Asian countries, creates distortions in relative markets, reduces availability of food, disrupts the supply chain, and increases cost of food to the end market. This indicator of corruption also adds insight into the capacity of the governance system to facilitate availability. Another key area that it also captures is the high level of urbanization that's taking place on this continent and in a large number of the developing countries and emerging markets. It's often correlated with greater food security. The process of urbanization can hurt food security if the development of resources is unable to maintain the pace and urban growth rates. Finally, quality and safety. This index also looks at a variety of the nutritional quality. It's not just a simple question of the number of the calories, it's what you really consume, the quality you consume. In the national diet, as well as the safety of food. Poor diet diversification often indicates a lack of sufficient nutrients and is frequently promoted as a solution to micronutrient deficiency and lack of protein. This also looks at the poor nutritional quality addressed through a better information and frequent monitoring of nutritional standards and safety. Food safety also considers the presence of regulated food markets. Which country has officially food regulation bodies who are effective and highly implemented according to the policies? Some of the results will not come as a huge surprise to you. As you can see, we've only selected a few. Which are the most top ones which are secure, food secure? It's the developed world. What are the key criteria to share? Ample food supply, high incomes, high GDP per capita, low spending on food relative to other outlays. Bottom, the least food secure countries are dominated by sub-Saharan African countries and South Asian, suffering from low GDP per head, high levels of corruption, low R&D in agriculture, and poor protein quality. So when you look at the model, it's best used to understand a number of key benchmarks to see what are the areas of strengths and weaknesses, best practices, all to be used to state priorities or mark areas for more research or action. Finally, our rankings is just a snapshot of global food security in those countries and regions most at risk. Importantly, the index is meant to spur dialogue about the drivers of food between all the stakeholders. It is a comprehensive twin-track approach that is needed to meet this global challenge. And just to give you a little bit more of the flavor of what the index is, a little bit more of the in-depth, what it looks like, what the functions are, my colleague Harold Langer will walk you through the Excel spreadsheets. Thank you. Thank you.